I'm 35 years old. And at 9:18 on a Tuesday night, my mother looked me straight in the face and said, "You're dead to this family." She didn't say it in anger during a messy argument. She didn't say it through tears. She said it calmly, deliberately, like she had rehearsed the sentence in the mirror and finally found the perfect time to use it. We were standing in the formal dining room of my parents' house, the same room where my father used to carve holiday roasts, where my brother's graduation photos lined the wall, where my mother kept the crystal cabinet locked because she said, "Some things are only for people who understand value." My older brother, Thomas, stood behind her with his arms crossed. His wife, Natalie, sat at the table, pretending to scroll through her phone while listening to every word. My father was in his leather chair near the window, silent, as usual. He had spent most of my life turning silence into a family tradition whenever my mother did something cruel. On the dining table sat a thick folder of documents I had spent 3 weeks preparing for them. Bank statements, property disclosures, tax records, care facility estimates, power of attorney forms. Everything they needed for the sale of my grandmother's house and the transfer of her long-term care into a private residence. A transfer my mother had been bragging about for months. A transfer that, unknown to most of the family, only worked because I had been handling every fragile detail behind the scenes. My mother pushed the folder toward me like it disgusted her. "We don't need your attitude," she said. "We don't need your judgment, and we don't need you acting like you're the only competent person in this family." I looked at the folder, then at her. "I'm not acting," Thomas scoffed. That was when she said it. "You're dead to this family, Lydia. Dead. Take your little folder and your bitterness and get out." The room went still, not shocked, relieved. That was what hurt most. Nobody looked surprised, not my brother, not his wife, not even my father. It felt like I had walked into the final scene of a play everyone had been rehearsing without me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I did something that frightened them more than shouting ever would have. I nodded, just once. I picked up the folder. And I said, "Okay." My mother blinked. Thomas frowned. Natalie looked up from her phone. They had expected tears. They had expected pleading. They had expected me to defend myself, explain myself, prove myself useful again. I did none of that. I turned and walked out. Behind me, my mother called, "And don't come crawling back when you realize you have no one." I stopped at the doorway, not because I was going to answer her, because I wanted to remember the sound of her confidence. 48 hours later, her lawyer called me 11 times before noon. By Friday morning, there were 32 missed calls from my mother, 17 from my brother, 9 from my father, and 6 from an unknown number that turned out to be the legal office handling my grandmother's estate transition. Then came the voicemail, not from my mother, from her attorney. His voice was careful at first, then tight around the edges. "Ms. Marlowe, this is Richard Bellamy. I represent your mother in the estate and care transition matter. We have an urgent issue, and frankly, we need you to answer the phone. Your family's closing cannot proceed without your cooperation." I listened to that voicemail twice. Then I sat at my kitchen table, drinking coffee that had gone cold, and stared at the same folder my mother had thrown back at me 2 nights earlier. The folder she said they didn't need. A folder containing the only clean record of a transaction they had already promised to people who were now asking questions. My mother had called me dead. But apparently, dead people were still useful when their signatures held the house upright. Before we continue, please like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts on this story. It really helps support the channel. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, because my family didn't start treating me like a tool that night. They had been practicing for years. I was not the favorite child. That title belonged to Thomas before I was old enough to understand competition. Thomas was 3 years older than me, handsome, loud, and gifted with the kind of confidence adults mistake for leadership when it comes from a boy. My mother called him the natural heir. My father called him the man of the house from the time he was 12, which would have been funny if it hadn't shaped the entire family around his ego. Thomas was allowed to fail dramatically. I was expected to succeed quietly. When Thomas crashed my father's car at 17, my mother said boys were impulsive. When I dented a cabinet moving groceries at 15, she said carelessness was a character flaw. When Thomas dropped out of college after 2 years and came home with debt, my father said he needed direction. When I graduated with a degree in estate administration and financial compliance, my mother said, "At least someone in this family likes paperwork." At least. That was the closest she came to pride. I built a career out of the thing they mocked. I worked for a private trust company that handled estate settlements, guardianship accounts, elder care funding, inheritance disputes, and property transitions. My job was to make sure families did not accidentally or intentionally destroy each other through sloppy documents and emotional decisions. I was good at it. Very good. I could read a property file and know where the danger was hiding. I could spot missing consent language in a care contract. I could tell when someone was using an elderly relative's assets as if family were a legal category instead of a moral excuse. My clients respected me. My colleagues trusted me. My family used me. It started small. Lydia, can you look over this insurance letter? Lydia, your father doesn't understand this tax notice. Lydia, Thomas is refinancing. Can you explain the terms? Lydia, your grandmother's bank needs a form. Can you handle it? Each request came wrapped in the same phrase. It will only take you a minute. It never did. By the time I was 32, I had become the invisible administrative spine of the Marlowe family. I reviewed contracts, corrected applications, found missing statements, called agencies, fixed billing errors, and translated consequences into language they could ignore. Nobody thanked me. They simply moved on to the next emergency. The latest emergency began with my grandmother, Evelyn Marlowe. Grandma Evelyn was my father's mother, though my mother treated her like a social inconvenience attached to an asset. She owned a small brick house on Maple Ridge Lane, purchased with my grandfather in 1969. It wasn't glamorous, but it was solid. 3 bedrooms, a sunroom, a back garden filled with hydrangeas, original hardwood floors, a cedar chest in the hallway that smelled like lavender and old letters. I loved that house, not because it was expensive, because it was honest. Grandma Evelyn had lived there alone after my grandfather died. For years, she managed well. Then her health declined. Not suddenly, slowly, missed bills, forgotten appointments. A kitchen fire that she insisted was barely smoke, even though the cabinets told another story. I was the one who noticed. Not Thomas, not my mother, not my father, me. I started visiting twice a week. I set up medication reminders, arranged a part-time caregiver, organized her bills, and reviewed her accounts. I did it because I loved her, but also because nobody else could be trusted to do it without turning her life into a convenience for themselves. Then my mother got interested. Not in Grandma's care. In her house. Maple Ridge Lane had appreciated in value because the neighborhood had become fashionable. Young families wanted old brick houses near the park. A developer had bought 2 properties nearby and renovated them into overpriced charm. Suddenly, my mother began using phrases like asset optimization and quality care transition, though I knew she had learned them from people at her country club who liked sounding compassionate while discussing real estate. Her plan was simple. Sell Grandma's house. Use part of the proceeds to place her in a private assisted living facility called Bellhaven Residence. Use the remaining funds to help my parents downsize from their oversized house into a more manageable, gated townhome near the lake. That last part was presented as temporary. It was not. My mother said it was efficient. I said it was legally delicate. She said I was negative. I said Grandma needed independent representation. She said I was making everything difficult. The problem was that Grandma Evelyn had named me as her financial power of attorney 2 years earlier. Quietly, without telling my parents. She had done it after my father borrowed from her emergency savings and forgot to mention it until I found the transfer. I remember the day she signed the document. We sat in her sunroom with Attorney Bellamy, the same lawyer who would later beg me to answer his calls. Grandma wore her blue cardigan and pearl earrings, her hands folded neatly on her lap. She looked at me and said, "Lydia knows how to say no even when people are louder than her." At the time, I laughed. Later, I understood she had given me a shield because she knew the day would come when I would need it. When my mother began planning the sale, she tried to behave as if I were merely helping with paperwork. But legally, my role mattered. Grandma was still competent enough to express preferences, but her declining memory meant every major transaction had to be clean, documented, and protected from claims of pressure. I was the authorized financial agent. I was also the person who had gathered medical letters, bank records, property tax documents, care estimates, and the legal disclosures required before proceeds could be moved. My mother hated that. Not openly at first. At first, she smiled. She called me our paperwork queen in front of relatives. She said she was grateful. She brought me coffee during one meeting and touched my shoulder like affection was a button she had remembered how to press. But every time I said no, the mask slipped. No, we could not use Grandma's sale proceeds to cover my parents' townhome deposit before care costs were fully secured. No, Thomas could not be reimbursed for management time when he had done nothing except attend one showing and complain about parking. No, my mother could not promise Belhaven residents a deposit until the sale contract cleared title review. No, we would not hide the water damage in the basement from the buyer. No, no, no. Each no made me less useful and more dangerous. Thomas became the first to say it out loud. One Sunday afternoon, we were in Grandma's kitchen sorting records. My mother had sent him to assist, which meant he sat at the table eating crackers while I scanned documents. He said, "You're enjoying this." I looked up. Enjoying what? Being in charge. I'm protecting Grandma. No, you're controlling everyone. I closed the folder in front of me. Thomas, you don't even know which utility bills are current. His jaw tightened. That's your problem. You think details make you superior. No, I think details make fraud harder. That was the first time he looked afraid of me. Not guilty. Afraid. 2 weeks later, I found the first real problem. A deposit had been placed on my parents' New Lake townhome, $50,000. The source of funds was listed as anticipated proceeds from Maple Ridge sale. Anticipated. Not received. Not cleared. Anticipated. When I confronted my mother, she waved her hand like I had brought up a seating chart issue. It's just to hold the property. With what money? She smiled too quickly. Our money. Which account? Her expression cooled. Lydia, do not interrogate me. I asked again. It came out eventually. Thomas had advanced the deposit from a business line of credit in his name, expecting to reimburse it from the sale once Grandma's house closed. My father had signed a side agreement. My mother had assured the realtor that the funds were family-backed. That phrase makes lawyers sweat. Family-backed means nothing. Family-backed is what people say when they want emotional trust to substitute for legal clarity. I told them the structure was unsafe. My mother said, "Unsafe is such an ugly word." I said, "So is misrepresentation." That was the beginning of the end. By Tuesday night, the buyer's side had requested additional basement disclosures. Belhaven residents needed updated proof of liquid funds before reserving Grandma's suite. The townhome seller wanted confirmation that my parents could close on schedule. Thomas's lender had started asking why a business line was being used for a personal deposit. Everyone wanted something. And because I was the only person who understood the chain, everyone wanted me to make the story sound cleaner than it was. I refused. That was why my mother summoned me to dinner. I should have known from the word dinner that it was a trap. We had not eaten family dinner together in months. When I arrived, no food was on the table, just the folder. My father sat by the window. Thomas stood near the cabinet. Natalie watched me with that detached expression people wear when they are glad someone else is being targeted. My mother began gently. "Lydia, we need you to stop complicating this." "I'm not complicating it, the facts are complicated." "You always do this," Thomas said. "You make everything sound criminal. Then stop doing things that sound criminal when summarized accurately." My mother slapped the table. "Enough." The crystal cabinet rattled. I looked at her. She was breathing hard, but her hair was perfect, her blouse smooth, her necklace centered. My mother could be cruel and still look ready for a photograph. She said, "Your grandmother needs care. Your father and I need to move. Thomas is trying to help, but you keep standing in the middle like some bitter little gatekeeper. I am the financial power of attorney." "You are a daughter," she snapped. "Act like one." That sentence told me everything. To her, daughter meant obedient. To Grandma, it had meant trustworthy. I pushed the folder toward her. "If you want this to proceed, the disclosures must be corrected. Belhaven must receive accurate funding information, and Thomas's line of credit cannot be represented as settled liquidity." Thomas laughed. "You hear yourself. No wonder you're alone." That one hit. Not because it was new, because he said it with pleasure. My mother did not correct him. My father looked at his shoes. I stood. "I'm leaving." My mother rose too. "No, you are going to fix this." "I already told you what needs fixing." "No," she said, voice low and sharp. "You are going to call Belhaven tomorrow, calm the buyer, reassure the townhome seller, and stop acting like your family is the enemy." I looked at her. "You're asking me to lie. I'm asking you to help." "No." That was when her face changed. The softness disappeared so quickly it was like watching a curtain drop. "You're dead to this family," she said. "Do you hear me? Dead. Take your folder and get out." So I did. I took the folder. I got out. And for the first time in my life, I decided not to repair the damage they caused by rejecting the person holding the repair kit. The next morning, I sent 4 emails. One to Attorney Bellamy, stating that I would no longer participate in any informal family-directed communication regarding the property sale, and that all matters involving Grandma Evelyn's finances must come through formal legal channels. One to Bellhaven residents, clarifying that no care deposit should be treated as confirmed until sale proceeds were finalized and protected for Grandma's benefit. One to the title coordinator, confirming that I would not approve any distribution plan that included reimbursement of personal or business advances before care funding was secured. One to the buyer's attorney, through proper channels, confirming that supplemental disclosures were pending and should not be bypassed. No threats. No emotion, no revenge speech, just accuracy. By 11:30 a.m., the buyer paused the closing. By 1:00 p.m., Bellhaven withdrew the suite reservation. By 3:15 p.m., the townhome seller issued a deadline for proof of funds. By 5:00 p.m., Thomas's lender requested clarification on the business line withdrawal. By 6:40 p.m., my phone began lighting up. Mother, Thomas, father, mother, unknown number, Thomas, mother, mother, mother. I did not answer. That night, my mother sent a text. You need to stop this immediately. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed, I'm dead, remember, I did not send it. Some replies are too satisfying to be useful. Instead, I muted the thread. Thursday was worse for them, better for the truth. Attorney Bellamy left his first voicemail at 8:12 a.m., then another at 9:03. Then my father called twice. Thomas called 6 times. My mother left one voicemail that began with, Lydia, whatever you think you heard, whatever I think I heard. That is how manipulative people try to turn recorded cruelty into a misunderstanding. By noon on Thursday, Bellamy sent an email marked urgent. Ms. Marlowe, your cooperation is required to prevent substantial harm to all parties. I replied, please specify which parties and which harm. My duty is to Evelyn Marlowe. He answered within 10 minutes. That told me the panic was real. The harm involved delayed sale proceeds, possible loss of the townhome deposit, Bellhaven cancellation fees, lender inquiry into Thomas's business line, and potential disputes regarding representations made to third parties. Representations made to third parties. Lawyer language. I knew what it meant. Someone had been saying things they could not prove. I asked him directly, has anyone represented that I approved the current funding structure? He did not answer for 42 minutes. Then there may have been assumptions based on your prior involvement. There it was. The word people use when they do not want to say lie. Assumptions. I printed the email, added it to the folder, and then I did something my family never expected. I called Grandma Evelyn, not my mother, not the lawyer. Grandma. Her voice was thinner than it used to be, but still hers. Lydia. Hi, Grandma. Your mother is upset. I closed my eyes. I know. She says you're making trouble. What do you think? There was a pause. Then she said, I think trouble was already there. You just turned on the light. That broke me more than my mother's cruelty had. I pressed my hand over my mouth. Grandma continued, I don't want Bellhaven. I sat up. What? I visited last month. Your mother said I loved it. I did not. It smelled like perfume and money. The garden was too small. I could not speak. She told everyone you approved it, Grandma said. I wondered if that was true. No, I said. I didn't approve it. I thought so. Grandma, where do you want to go? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, somewhere with windows and people who talk to me like I am still in the room. That sentence made the entire fight worth it. Because until that moment, everyone had been arguing about money, deposits, documents, timelines, reputation. Nobody had asked Grandma where she wanted to live. I called Bellamy afterward and told him we had a bigger problem. Grandma Evelyn did not consent to the proposed care arrangement. He went silent. Ms. Marlowe, he said finally, are you certain? Yes. That complicates matters. No, I said. It clarifies them. Friday morning, my mother's lawyer begged me to answer because he now had 3 fires instead of 1. The sale was delayed. The care plan was invalid. The townhome deposit was at risk. Thomas's lender had questions, and Grandma wanted independent review. At 10:04 a.m., Bellamy called again. This time I answered. He sounded exhausted. Ms. Marlowe, thank you. We need to resolve this before your family suffers irreversible financial consequences. I said, my grandmother is the client. Of course. Then say it correctly. A pause. We need to resolve this before Mrs. Evelyn Marlowe suffers harm. Better, he exhaled. What are your terms? I looked at the folder on my desk. Terms, as if I were negotiating revenge. I wanted clean lines. My terms are simple. Grandma gets independent counsel. The house sale is paused until disclosures are corrected. No proceeds are pledged toward my parents' townhome until her care is fully funded. Thomas's business line is not reimbursed from her assets without review, and nobody uses my name, title approval, or prior involvement in any communication without written consent. Bellamy said nothing. Then softly, your mother will object. I'm aware. Your brother will object. I'm counting on it. He cleared his throat. And if they refuse? Then I remain dead. The family meeting happened Monday at Bellamy's office. I insisted on that. Not my parents' house. Not a restaurant. Not somewhere my mother could weaponize tears and lighting. A conference room. Neutral table. Witnesses. Grandma Evelyn attended by video with an independent elder advocate beside her. That detail alone made my mother furious. She arrived in a cream suit and pearls, looking like she had been personally betrayed by due process. My father sat beside her, gray-faced and tired. Thomas came late and slammed his phone on the table. Natalie did not come, which was the first wise thing I had seen her do. Bellamy opened the meeting. My mother interrupted immediately. I want it noted that Lydia is doing this out of spite. I looked at Bellamy. Is this being recorded? Yes. Good. My mother's mouth tightened. The meeting began with the property sale. The buyer wanted updated disclosures on the basement water damage and roof repairs. My father admitted after 15 minutes of dancing around it that the roof issue had been known for 6 months. Then came Belhaven. Grandma's advocate stated plainly that Evelyn did not wish to move there and had expressed concerns about pressure from family members. My mother said, she's confused. Grandma's face appeared on the screen. I am old, Patricia, not decorative. The room went silent. I almost smiled. Then came the money, Thomas's business line, the townhome deposit. Expected reimbursement, the family-backed statement. Bellamy laid it out carefully, but there was no way to make it sound clean because it was. Thomas finally snapped. This is ridiculous. Grandma's money was always going to stay in the family. I looked at him. It is staying with Grandma. You know what I mean. Yes, I said, that's the problem. My mother turned on me then. You have always hated that your brother mattered. There it was. The old wound, sharpened and thrown, I felt it land. Then I felt something stronger rise behind it. No, I said. I hated that the rest of us were expected to fund it. Thomas stood. You think you're better than us? I looked at the folder, then at him. No, I think I kept records. Bellamy quietly asked Thomas to sit down. He did. That was the first time I had ever seen my brother obey someone who was not impressed by volume. The meeting ended after 2 hours. The result was not pretty, but it was clean. Grandma would receive independent counsel. The sale would be renegotiated with corrected disclosures. Belhaven was canceled. A more modest care residence with better staffing and a real garden would be reviewed. No townhome proceeds would be released until Grandma's care was secured. Thomas would handle his own lender problem. My parents' Lake townhome deal died by Wednesday. They lost part of the deposit. My mother called it theft. I called it tuition. Some lessons cost money. The fallout spread faster than I expected. Not because I spoke publicly. Because people who build their image on stability cannot hide sudden collapse. My mother had already told half the town she was moving into a lake residence. She had described Belhaven in detail at church luncheons. She had accepted congratulations. She had implied the family was coming together beautifully around Grandma's transition. Now the townhome was gone. Belhaven was gone. The house sale was delayed. Thomas's lender had frozen his line pending review. And Grandma Evelyn, in one glorious act of quiet rebellion, told 2 of her friends that Lydia was the only one who had asked what she wanted. Older women talk. People underestimate that at their peril. Within weeks, the story changed. Not everywhere. My mother still had loyal listeners. Thomas still told people I had sabotaged the family out of jealousy. My father still said nothing, which was how he kept disappointing everyone with efficiency. But enough people understood. Enough people had seen this family dynamic before. A cousin called me and said, I always wondered why every crisis somehow landed on you. A former neighbor sent a message. Your grandmother looked happier yesterday than she has in months. Even Bellamy, in his careful lawyer way, emailed me after the revised care plan was signed. Your intervention prevented significant future disputes. That was as close to applause as a lawyer gets. Grandma moved 6 weeks later into a residence called Willow Court. It was not glamorous. No marble lobby, no staged piano, no brochure language about elevated living. But it had large windows, a garden with benches, nurses who spoke to residents directly, and a room where Grandma could keep her cedar chest. The day we moved her in, she asked me to place a photo of Grandpa on the bedside table. Then she said, "Your mother will hate that this place is sensible." "She does," Grandma smiled. "Good, sensible things last longer," I laughed. Then she took my hand. "Did she really say you were dead to the family?" I looked down. "Yes," Grandma squeezed my fingers. "Then we must be a very lucky family to have ghosts who file paperwork." That was the first time I laughed without pain in weeks. As for my parents, they remained in their old house longer than planned. The corrected disclosures lowered the sale price. The buyer negotiated hard. My father had to take a consulting job to cover the shortfall from the lost deposit. My mother stopped mentioning lake views. Thomas's business line became a separate disaster. Once his lender started reviewing the withdrawal, they discovered other personal expenses mixed into company funds. Not enough to ruin him completely, but enough to embarrass him in front of the people whose respect he valued. Natalie stopped posting lifestyle photos for a while. That told me more than any family update could. My mother requested one private meeting with me after everything settled. I almost said no. Then Grandma said, "Go if you want the last word. Don't go if you want the last piece." I thought about that for 2 days. Then I agreed to meet at a small attorney's conference room, not at home. My mother arrived alone. No pearls this time, just a gray sweater and a face that looked older without performance holding it up. For a moment I felt sad. Then I remembered sadness is not a summons. She sat across from me. "I want to understand why you did this," she said. I almost laughed. Even then, even after everything, why I did this. Not why she said what she said. Not why they used my name. Not why they ignored Grandma. I said, "You told me I was dead to the family." Her eyes filled. I was angry. "You were honest." She flinched. "That is a cruel thing to say." "No, it was a cruel thing to hear. There's a difference." She looked away. "I lost a great deal because of you." I nodded. "There it is." "What?" "The reason you came, not because you hurt me, because losing access to me became expensive." Her face hardened. For a second, the old mother returned. "You always were ungrateful." I stood. She looked startled. "That's it." "Yes, we're not finished." "We are." She looked up at me, and for one small moment I saw panic, not love, not remorse. Panic that the old door no longer opened. I said, "You can tell people whatever version helps you sleep, but you and I know the order. You cut me off. You kept using my role. I withdrew. The truth came out. That is all." She began to cry. I did not move. Tears had run this family for years, not anymore. As I reached the door, she said, "Are you really done with us?" I turned back. "No," I said. "You were done with me. I'm just the first one to respect it." Then I left. That was 8 months ago. My life is quieter now, not empty. Quiet. I visit Grandma every Sunday. We sit in the garden at Willow Court, and she complains that the tea is weak, the roses are badly pruned, and one of the nurses is too handsome to be trusted. She is happier than she would have been at Belhaven because dignity, it turns out, does not require chandeliers. I bought myself a new dining table. Small, round, no crystal cabinet, no locked shelves. No chairs reserved for people who only value daughters when documents need signing. Sometimes my father calls. I answer rarely. When I do, I keep it brief. Thomas has not spoken to me since the meeting. That is fine. My mother sends holiday cards with only her name signed, not love. I keep them in a drawer because documentation is a habit I may never lose. People ask if I got revenge. I don't know. If revenge means screaming until someone hurts the way you hurt, then no. But if revenge means letting people live inside the consequences of the sentence they threw at you, then maybe. Maybe revenge is simply believing someone the first time they tell you what you are to them. Maybe it is refusing to keep saving people from the weight of their own words. My mother said I was dead to the family. 48 hours later, her lawyer begged me to answer. Not because they missed me, because the deal missed me. The documents missed me. The truth missed me. The system they had built on my invisible labor could not function once I stopped pretending love and usefulness were the same thing. My name is Lydia Marlowe. I was the daughter they called bitter, the sister they called jealous, the granddaughter who kept the records, the ghost who still knew where every signature belonged. And when my family finally learned that cutting me off meant cutting themselves off from the only person holding their lies together, I did not crawl back. I did not shout. I did not beg. I simply let the dead stay dead long enough for the living to read the paperwork.